Well, a very good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Payday Super webinar presented by Beam. My name is Andrew Hellier from Reckon, and I'll be hosting today's session. Now, I did want to start by thanking you all for taking the time out of your busy mornings to join us on the call today. Now, today's webinar should run for approximately 20 to 25 minutes, and then we'll have some time for questions after that. And if you do experience any audio issues during the presentation, you can just refer to the phone dial-in preferences that are located on the little GoTo webinar control panel widget or on a confirmation email you would have been sent from GoTo webinar. Now, today's webinar is designed for you to get an understanding and a bit of an update on the upcoming Payday Super changes that will affect Australian businesses who employ staff from July 2026. Now, in this session, I'll be covering off just a bit of a short intro and a bit of housekeeping. Then I'm going to hand over to Michael from Beam to talk through the details of this upcoming change and how you can get prepared right now. And if you are an accountant or bookkeeper on the call, how you can chat with your clients to make sure and ensure that they are informed and ready for the upcoming changes. Now, I'm very excited to introduce our presenter today, and that is Michael Abbott from Beam. Now, Michael Abbott is a partnership manager at Beam, and with over 25 years of experience in the financial services industry, Michael is passionate about creating and maintaining productive partnerships that support our software partners in achieving their growth aspirations and goals. Now, before I do hand over to you, Michael, like I mentioned, there will be time for questions at the end of the session. Now, for those that have attended a webinar before, you don't have to wait till the end of the session to ask your question. Just pop it into the question box if anything comes to mind. We do have a large number of people attending this webinar today, so Michael and I are going to do our best to get through everybody's question. However, if we don't get through to your individual question, apologies in advance, and we'll address those questions after the webinar. So once again, thank you so much for joining, and thank you, Michael, for joining us today to speak with our clients. Really excited to hear from you. So I'll hand over to you now, and let's get started. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Andrews. Thank you so much, and welcome to everyone. It's very exciting, obviously, to be online, to be able to talk you through where we think Payday Super is up to and what we think that might do from your business perspective. So I'm going to provide you with some information very soon, and towards the end we have some time for some questions. So just to move on to my first slide. Sorry, I'm just trying to get this first slide too.
All good, Michael. These are the pleasures of live presentations. Sometimes always work as planned, so bear with us, audience. We're just going to sort this out very quickly.
Okay, sorry about that.
There we go.
Okay, so look, you know, Payday Super. I mean, I guess the thing from that we'd like to be able to, our theme is, you know, how better retirement outcomes can be supported with payroll integration. We'll be happy to talk about, obviously, our partner in Reckon and how that's that integration is actually put into play. Of course, before we talk about anything, there's always the classic disclosure slide. So just letting you know that I'm actually going to give you a general advice. There's no personal advice given as part of this presentation, and that Beam is owned as a brand that's owned by Precision, and Precision Administration Services is effectively owned by the Australian Retirement Trust. So maybe I'll just give a quick bit of information about the Australian Retirement Trust. Effectively, a $320 billion super fund, second biggest fund in Australia, around 2.4 million members. So its heritage over 100 years. It formed by the joining of QSuper and Sunsuper together a few years back, and it's created a very exciting opportunity, of which Beam is part of that. So thank you for that, just listening to that disclaimer. So let's talk a little bit about super. And we understand that from an employer's perspective, super is such a small component of what an employer does every day. Historically, most employers in provision of super, have extracted a file from the payroll and loaded that into a super portal. Most employers do their payment every quarter, but probably about 40% of the ones certainly that use Beam pay on a monthly cycle or already. You, as part of the onboarding of new staff, a staff member must choose the super fund, and they use what's called the standard choice form for this, and that's entered into the payroll manually, which obviously can cause lots of complications. I guess the environment that we're seeing changing is that all of these components here, the performance, the payroll, the employer self-serve, the reporting, traditionally have been separate systems, whether they're manual, whether they're a separate system, or whether they've partially integrated or a combination of both. The world has changed a little bit, and there's a lot more integration coming in with all these systems now, and like partners like Reckon are starting to integrate all these partners into a single opportunity for the employer. I guess to give some context to where Payday Super has come from, it's interesting to look back at the evolution of super in Australia, and to be able to see where we've come from in the last 10 years. Super's been around since the 70s really, and it's been pretty much a manual paper-based system up until about 2015. And in 2015, I guess if you look at the environment then, you send off a check to your super fund. You have a paperly quarter contribution file that you write up and you send off. Paper joins for every new employee that joins has to fill out a paper form, and you have to go and chase those, or used to have to go and chase those. The default super effectively came in, so every employer had to have a default super fund that for those members who weren't, or those employees who weren't choosing a fund or didn't have a fund, that they would get put to the default fund for the employer. Effectively in 2015, there was no major ATO reporting, and super funds, when they're accepting a contribution, could have up to 20 days to process that super payment. 2015, 2022, we started to see the advent of digital, and digital really kicked on in 2020 when, interesting enough, COVID made a lot of challenges to the industry because, we weren't face-to-face anymore. We weren't doing things face-to-face, and therefore electronic means were very necessary to be able to support the industry and support everyone. So we started to see electronic contributions. Paper join forms were still a thing, and default super funds with increasing choice. So not only did an employer have a default fund, but there could have been multiple default funds for an employer. The ATO came out with what we call the STP, and version 1 and version 2 has now been up and running for a number of years. Monthly and quarterly super contributions were certainly the norm, but the super funds were processing super within 3 and 5 days, or most super funds were processing that within 3 to 5 days. In 2022, we really started to see the integration of payroll systems with super, rather than being two separate streams. Effectively, many payroll providers have now started to integrate that super choice within that payroll system, and Beam is one of those that has been integrated for Reckon, and I'll talk a little bit about that as we go through. Also, Super's been now part of the employer onboarding software, so it's actually a part of that journey. It's not a separate piece of paper that comes in, so that's made a big difference for employers. The stapling of super funds became a legislation, and effectively that just means that it's reuniting or confirming that the person's current super fund, as defined by the ATO, is the fund that would be potentially the next contribution would come to under the new join from an employer perspective. That's had a lot of challenges, and I'll talk a little bit about some of those challenges as I go through. I guess the STP version 2 has been now completed and been up and running for a while. So effectively, we're now ready to move into this next environment, which is the announcement of the Payday Super. But that's a little bit about the involvement in the industry. Obviously, there's been things that the employers have to do in relation to SuperStream, and SuperStream reporting has been in for some time, which is a standard messaging service effectively for superannuation contributions. So, Payday Super. Well, Payday Super, as you're probably aware, has now been given by the Treasury a proposed start date of the 1st of July 2026. This is where employers will be required to pay their employees super at the same time as the salary and as their salary and wages. I mean, the change is intended to reduce the payroll's liabilities for the employer, but it's also make it easier for the employee to keep track of their super contributions. And I think this is a really important aspect of growing your super, of having a better retirement outcome. The earlier your money gets to a super fund, the earlier the time that your money starts to earn compounding interest effectively, and the more money you should have when you retire. So the whole concept of Payday Super is very noble from that perspective, but there's obviously lots of challenges that we'll talk about as we go through to be able to implement this change. I mean, some of those challenges you can already foresee that if you only have to pay super now for four times a year, and your pay cycle is weekly, you're now going to have to pay your employees 52 times, or you're now going to have to take a superannuation payment and pay the super fund 52 times a year. So just simply by that concept, there's a huge increase in the amount of, I guess, legal liability that you will have as an employer, but also the complexities of just being able to do that and the resourcing necessary to be able to, to keep track of that. And I'll talk a little bit about that as well. And also one of the challenges around that is how do you continually validate the data that you're processing that ultimately you need to be able to send to the super fund to ensure that you're meeting your obligation around paying super in the timelines. And some of that super changes have occurred as well in around timeliness in relation to payments. And I'll talk a little bit about that also as we go through. So let's do a bit of a snapshot about Payday Super. So Payday Super was announced in the 23-24 federal budget, and only recently the ATO and the Treasury consulted and confirmed that the 1st of July will be the date that we'll be implementing Payday Super. Along the way, the Treasury and the ATO have consulted with super funds, industry, and stakeholders, and we were lucky to be asked to be involved. And our founder of our business, Matt Gilroy, has been participating in a number of these stakeholder sessions and providing insight into what we think would be an appropriate way to be able to manage Payday Super as we go forward. I think some of the challenges in relation to Payday Super and some of the things that we're going to have to all as an industry start to respond to is that from the 1st of July, employees will be required to pay it on the same day. Employees must receive that contribution in their super account within 7 calendar days of that payday. Payday is defined as the date the employer makes an ordinary times earning payment to the employee, is the definition. As you can see on this presentation, there are some limited exceptions to the 7 days, and that is for what we understand to date is for 2 exceptions, and the exceptions are for new hires. So new hire, you have an extra 2 weeks effectively before that pay cycle where that person gets employed to be able to lodge that superannuation payment. And there's also some small or irregular super payments that are also outside of this pay cycle that it's deemed to be acceptable to pay it on the next pay cycle. What we don't know is any detail about that, and we haven't been supplied any data so far or any information from the ATO or through legislation to be able to confirm what that process will be. There's also what we're going to see is a change to the SG charges if you don't pay super on time, and I think this is quite a significant change. So under the regime, in the event that there's a shortfall, an applicable SG charge is made up of 3 components. So it's effectively the SG shortfall calculated based on the wages and earnings of that person. There's a nominal interest rate of 10% per annum, and there's an administration fee of $20 per quarter. What we've seen in the fact sheet coming through from the ATO is that that's going to change a little bit, and that change will definitely impact an employer if they haven't made or rectified that superannuation payment in a quick time frame within a certain period of time. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through. Let's talk a little bit about Beam, and I think the important thing is about why has Beam invested in the future of super. Our purpose is really to bring super and their people and their super closer together. As mentioned at the start, it's about trying to get people engaged in their super. So the more that their super is going into their account, hopefully the more engaged someone's going to get. Hopefully the more amount of super balance is going to grow as a result of that. And we at Beam think Payday Super is a positive step, but we acknowledge that there's a lot of challenges out there, to also to be overcome. And without the detail from the ATO at this particular point in time, we'll be interested to see what happens. We understand that by the end of this calendar year, the legislation will be put forward into Parliament, so we'll have some idea about some of the specific rules that will be guiding us in the Payday Super regime. I think that one of the biggest challenges that an employer, that anyone gets in relation to collecting information about an employee and then passing that through to the super fund is there's a lot of validation and compliance that needs to occur. And one of the things that Beam has been really strong on is, well, we need to make it easier for the employer to be able to transition that information from the payroll to the super fund of choice. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the major features of Beam, but this is the reason why Beam is so important, I guess, within a payroll system. Why has Payday Super been hard for many businesses? Well, there's an absolute why it will be hard for any businesses. There's an absolute increase in the admin burden and the time spent making payroll. Payday Super doesn't fix that. It just makes it much harder. There's an increased risk of compliance and data quality, and I just started talking a little bit about that because of the volumes. And again, think about that volumes. If you've got one employee that you have and that person gets paid weekly, well, you would have made 4 payments last year. This year, you're making 52. If you've got 1,000 employees, well, think of those numbers and the complication that you have to do to validate every single employee every single time you make a super payment. You need help, you need support with technology, and having an integrated super payment system like Beam within your payroll system makes that workload much easier. And I'll certainly talk a little bit more about that as well. I think also one of the big challenges that businesses are going to have is obviously the cash flow management. Now, currently, many small businesses because that's only paying the super payments every quarter, will use those payments, what could have been allocated to those payments for other things within their business to manage cash flow. It's going to become much more challenging to be able to make those payments, but effectively our payment of monies to our employees is actually super and wages. Those two things have been always connected. It just happens to be that the regime has never made it mandatory to be able to send your super contribution at the same time as you get paid into your bank account. So I think that's a really important change for people. You know, what can businesses do? Well, you can review and determine if your payroll and onboarding process can be streamlined in any way. You can consider, you know, whether a trusted partner with a complete Supertech solution can support your business, i.e. Beam in this particular case, integrated into Reckon. You know, you really need to check your payroll team that they were aware of the obligations, that they're aware of the dates, the timeliness, that they're trained, they're upskilled. Potentially, you may even have to hire new people or more people to be able to support this. And obviously, that hiring comes at an additional cost to your business. And you probably do need to get some sort of advice on the cash flow management. How can you make that cash flow work more effectively now that it's required to be paid on the pay cycles? So what are the benefits of an integrated solution? And specifically, talking about Beam. Well, at Beam, or an integrated solution, effectively that solution provider is required to keep that system updated. Anytime the regulations change, the system will be updated by that provider and then automatically flow through into the payroll system. And I think that's a really important thing about keeping compliant. The software, the RegTech helps keep you compliant. Obviously, there's going to be lots of challenges coming up as we move into new payment environments as well, and we're seeing some of the banking industry changes coming through over the next few years where we're moving to different types of payment options. Credit cards are obviously been around for a while, but Pay2 is a potential solution that employers and super funds are going to have to be able to manage and cater with into the future. At Beam, we're really proud that we've been able to get our ISO 27001-22 certification standard, and that's a standard that is at the highest quality, that you have to get external people who come in and review your system requirements to ensure that you have met some of those serious system needs. And we've only just had ours refreshed in the last couple of months. I think the other thing that your integrated software and payroll provider need to do is to ensure that as you grow, the system grows with you. So you don't want to be paying extra money for employees that join your fund, join your employer. So with Beam, employers can effectively pay super for unlimited number of employees. And it can all be done within the super system. So within the super system. So going into the Reckon payroll, there's a section in that payroll which enables Beam. So you can go in under the superannuation section, and with a simple click of the button, you get to enable Beam. Beam then effectively provides 4 screens that an employee needs to go through and just fill out, and that information is pre-populated. It's actually pulled from the payroll system, so it's really an employer just checking that information is correct. Once that information's been correct, it's confirming the terms and conditions at the end, and that is done. The process to register with Beam is then complete. Once Beam is connected, you then are able to transmit any employee that you have a payroll event for. You are able to use Beam. What Beam does as part of that transmission process is it actually does the validation. It does the validation of the data that you send to the super funds at a number of levels. The first level, it may create an error message that will come back and to say you can't process this particular payment because there's missing information, and that information could be like it could be that the fund that you're trying to send the money to is actually closed and won't accept that. That will come back as an error. That error can then be rectified very quickly before the payments get pushed off, or that particular person can be isolated and the rest of the payroll can be processed. And I think that's a really important way of meeting that 7-day obligation. The other aspect of the validation process is that it will be checking things like membership numbers, tax file numbers, phone numbers, and these all come back as I guess, not errors, but warnings. And those warnings can then be overridden and fixed at another time. You still can process your super payments at that particular moment. So having something like that occur so that you're getting this overlay of validation as you're processing your superannuation payment makes your payroll much more easier and much more certain that you're going to be able to get the super through those funds within the time frames that's required. Not only today, but certainly when Payday Super comes around. I think I'll probably just leave it there for the moment and just send it back to Andrew for any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much, Michael. Fantastic detail and information on what we know so far about the Payday Super changes, which at this stage are going live on the 1st of July 2026. And at this stage, do we know when the legislation will pass, Michael? I know draft legislation has been submitted around Payday Super. I mean, from yourself and the team there at Beam, what are you sort of hearing from the government in terms of when that legislation will pass? Do you think it's going to be this year? Do you think it's going to be next year? What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think what we're hearing is it'll definitely be next year. We do hear that there will be draft legislation available by the end of this calendar year. I personally think that might be a little bit doubtful, and it's probably going to push to January, February. But we'll definitely know by the end of the financial year. It'll be definitely up and running.
Definitely, and I think some more information will be available for us.
That's right.
Obviously, this is all.
Sorry, Andrew, I was just going to say, and we'll know more things about whether there's any carve-outs of the existing arrangement as well. At the moment, all businesses need to comply by that particular date. But as you probably would be aware, there's certainly lots of discussions going on with interested groups with the government, and as in lots of superannuation legislation in the past, there's always been parties who present different views, and of which the government takes that into consideration and will make a decision on that. So at the moment, we understand 1st of July 2026 is the date that all businesses will go live from.
Definitely fantastic. Yeah, good insights and points there. And obviously the purpose of these sessions is to give the information as we know it right now. And as Michael mentioned, there are going to be more details that get released as we get a little bit closer to that 1st of July 2026 date, and there will be a lot more information that is released once that legislation is passed. So we'll be able to run more of these sessions with Michael and the fantastic team at Beam to give everyone a little more information to how you can be prepared. But I suppose if you are a Reckon customer on the call here, or an accountant or a bookkeeper who has clients using Reckon Payroll, that includes the mobile app. Reckon integrates with Beam right now. So you can essentially get prepared for Payday Super straight away. There's no additional cost for using the Beam services. You can get it set up right now. It only takes a handful of minutes to do that. It's, as I mentioned, there's no extra charge. Once the pay run has been processed in Reckon Payroll, a simple click of the button then is all it takes to send that that information off via the Beam platform to the super funds, and the money is automatically deducted and distributed from the funds. So that is available right now. Michael, there are a few more questions that we've got here. So there's quite a few actually. So thank you everyone for listening, and thank you so much for posting your questions. So we're going to try and get through as many as we can now. So I guess the first question we have straight up, Michael, is if we were to enable Beam from Reckon Payroll and start submitting our super straight away from the product, how long does it generally take? So when I click the button to submit that super contribution information from Reckon Payroll, what is the process from Beam's side? How long does it take to deduct the money? How long does it take for the funds to receive the money generally?
Yeah, no, it's good. It's a good question. It's roughly about 2.66 days, actually, I think, is the actual average that we take to process it. And I think we are, I don't want to use the word victim, but the banking system is the slowest part of the process. It is about getting cleared funds. So the moment once you push the button to process the super batch, effectively that's immediately transmitted to through the validation engine. Once that's been done effectively, as long as it's done by 3:30, processed on 3:30 on any given day, it is processed to the bank accounts as a batch that day. And generally it's around 2 to 3 days before the whole payment system is complete, and that return of information comes back through to the Reckon Payroll system, which confirms that the batch has been paid.
Yeah, fantastic, nice and quick. It's so easy. And are there any other methods of payment, Michael? Is it just a direct debit from bank account, or can you choose to pay by EFT, for example, if you'd like more control of the payment? I think that's still possible if you use the Beam product.
That's right, Andrew. So there's three payment options that we have. So it's EFT, BPay, and direct debit. We know that some of the very large employers don't like to do the direct debit. They're very happy to do a EFT payment and a BPay payment. Effectively, all we require in that is that the system produces a PRN number, which is a reference number. It's about copying that particular number as it is directly into your BPay or your EFT slip, which enables Beam to be able to match that batch exactly so that it gets processed immediately. If it doesn't match, we'll obviously send back some error message to be able to say there's an extra number in the PRN or whatever it is. Some employers have actually might include extra details in there. Well, that will actually mean that the batch will fail. You just need the PRN for us to be able to match that batch up.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you, Michael. And it's just great that Beam offers that flexibility in terms of different payment options. Love that BPay's in there as well. I do appreciate that you may still be on the call and you do have to jump off. Michael and I are going to continue with a few more questions because there are quite a few to get through. But if you have to jump off, once again, thank you very much for joining us. This session is being recorded, so we'll send it out a little bit later on this afternoon once the recording's finished processing. So if you missed any of the beginning, or you'd like to come back and review anything that Michael has touched on, or you just want to hear a little bit more of the discussion, that recording will be available a little bit later on this afternoon. So back to questions, Michael, and I apologise if I'm looking away here at the moment. I'm just looking at the other screen, my other monitor here. How many employees do you think you need to, as a business, Michael, to make using Beam worthwhile?
Well, it's an interesting question, Andrew. I would say you need one, and I don't mean that to say that in a frivolous way, but because it's already enabled through your Reckon Payroll, and that you don't have, there's no additional fees for using Beam. It's cost effective, absolutely, from one employee all the way up to thousands of employees. So I'd recommend anyone, whether it's 1 or 1,000, to enable Beam and to use Beam. It will make payments much easier. It will make super compliance much easier. It'll just be a much more effective way to be able to manage. You'll be able to sleep at night. I mean, we've got many examples of clients who have used file uploads, even for one or two employees, and the preparation and the sleepless nights that they get in relation to making sure that that payment gets done in the appropriate time to the super fund, so that they have that compliance piece of paper for the ATS, so they don't get charged. It's an amazing that this can really take away all of that pain for you, and give you back time in your business as well. When you think about the time it takes to process a SAF file, upload that information to the fund, do the validation manually, because you have to do it between the super fund and the payroll system that they're currently using. That in itself could take 2 or 3 days per month to be able to process a batch cycle. So it makes a big difference to be able to have all that validation and have that batch transfer happen almost instantaneously.
Definitely, no, great points there, and I've got just a few more questions keep popping up while we're talking, Michael, around costs. So just to reiterate that if you are using Reckon Payroll, or if you're an accountant or bookkeeper on the call that has clients using Reckon Payroll, there's no additional cost to use Beam. It's included in the price of your subscription. So there are no associated fees. Also, just another question around, I know you mentioned SAF files before, and the business of any size, in my opinion, if you're using Reckon Payroll, should go and set this up now after the webinar. I mean, there's just sort of room for error, in my opinion. I think especially if you're using the small business clearinghouse, because I think, Michael, at the moment that there is talk about that government small business clearinghouse being, I suppose, made redundant from the 1st of July 2026. And at this stage, I mean, that small business clearinghouse, I don't believe actually takes a SAF file. You actually have to go and key in the amounts manually, don't you? So there is room for error there. I mean, so if you are on the call using that small business clearinghouse, I mean, it would be an idea to definitely look at Beam to see how you can just automate the process now. And I guess also we've had another question that said, can we use Beam and pay super quarterly now, Michael, until those changes come in from the 1st of July 2026, and then switch, I suppose, your time frame of paying super?
Yes, the answer to that's absolutely yes. I mean, Beam effectively, once it's been enabled by the employer, could make multiple payments daily if they wished, all the way up to quarterly payments. So Beam absolutely at the moment does quarterly payments and any other payment option that you have. So as soon as it's been enabled through the Reckon Payroll, you can make a payment, and you can make a payment quarterly to all the way up to the 1st of July 2026, when they change the regulations to be whatever paid time frequency you're paying, you get the super done at the same time. So it's absolutely compliant today, and it's compliant, and it will be compliant already from what we know on the 1st of July 2026.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. And we talked about that government small business clearinghouse, which currently doesn't take a SAF file and will be shut down in July 2026. So obviously, if you're using that, you could stop and then start using Beam from your next pay run if you want. But what about if you're using another clearinghouse? I mean, how easy is it just to switch over to Beam? Is there anything you need to do?
No, it's still a very simple process of just registering and enabling that Beam through the Reckon Payroll. As soon as that's done, all the connectivity that's required that replaces effectively the SAF file is done immediately, and that then enables that employer to remove the previous clearinghouse or previous process that they've been using. So there's nothing else that they have to do other than do the enabling of Beam through your software.
Yeah, fantastic. It's a nice, easy switch. And I think what we'll do after the webinar here, Michael, is for all of the attendees on the call here, we'll send out a bit of an information pack. We've got some frequently asked questions that the fantastic team at Beam have put together, and we'll also include some instructions in that email on how you can configure Beam and register for Beam and get that set up now in preparation for Payday Super. We've had a couple of questions also, Michael, and I think I know the answer to this, but I'll let you answer it. I think it's more in your territory. But is there any talk from the government side whether there'll be a staggered approach, like they might say large or substantial employers from the 1st of July 2026 will come on board, and we might allow closely held or micro employers another year? Do you think there's going to be a staggered approach, or do you feel that it's just going to be all Australian employers, no matter how many employees that you have from the 1st of July 2026? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, our involvement with the working groups and with the ATO have indicated that the 1st of July 2026 is the date for everyone. We do know that, you know, with all pieces of legislation that ultimately get approved in this country, that there are people who have different views on things, and they do lobby the government and lobby various parties to be able to potentially get different carve-outs. And we did hear prior to the ATO paper that there might have been a requirement for small businesses to go first and big businesses to go on a year later. But from what we understand from the latest consultation that we've been involved in, that is not being considered, that it's about 1st of July 2026, and that's it for every business.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing as well, Michael. It seems like it's just going to be an all-in approach for all employers across Australia, and I think that there's just been ample time. This has been talked about for a long time, and it's just fantastic that we're able to partner with awesome tech platforms like Beam to just make complying with Payday Super so easy, right? So as I mentioned before, we are looking forward to sending that email out to everyone later this afternoon. I know we've got a few questions about how we can get that set up now. So we'll include some instructions in the email along with those frequently asked questions, along with the recording. But we are right on 11:45 now, Michael. So I think we might leave it there for now. I'm sorry we didn't get to your question. There were a lot that came through. A little bit later this afternoon, Michael and I and the team from Beam and the wider team from Reckon will have a look at these questions, and we'll aim to get back to you over the next couple of days. But once again, thank you everyone for attending the session, and thank you so much, Michael, for presenting to our clients and our partners today. We really appreciate having you here, and we love the fact that we have an awesome partner like Beam to support our clients on their Payday Super journey.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great Friday and a fantastic weekend.